All these developments with Lorenzo Kamel now, who's a professor of history of international relations at the University of Turin, is joining us from Rome. Thank you very much, Professor Kamel, for being with us once again on Al Jazeera. Let's discuss first the resolution at the UN Security Council, which was finally passed after many days of delays, a first resolution at the Security Council on Gaza. What message do you think it sends, and what effects do you think it will have on the ground?
You have a very limited effect, and now somehow the sentence used in the resolution, meaning creating the condition for a ceasefire, it's broad enough for using a diplomatic way for saying no to a ceasefire. But it's interesting to analyze the reason why many of these countries, particularly Western countries, reject a ceasefire after a disproportionate attack which killed over 8,000 children. The reason why they claim this is acceptable because they claim that we need first to eradicate Hamas. But what does it mean to eradicate Hamas? This is a key question, I think. And in order to answer to this question, we need to always keep into account that 70% of the inhabitants of the Gaza Strip come from families of refugees that were expelled from Najd, Mashdal, Abu Sita, Ujd, and a number of other villages on the ashes of which later have been built Shderot, Oraner, and other villages. These populations, the Gaza Strip, have been oppressed and brutalized for decades. And for those who claim that all this started with the criminal attack of Hamas in October the 7th, Palestinians are invisible and deserve somehow to be dehumanized. Let me also remind you who are the three main founders of Hamas and why it matters to know who are these three founders. The first of the three was al-Yatsuri. Part of his family was massacred in Beit Aras, and the rest was expelled when he was 8 years old and was expelled to Khan Yunis, that now is under the bombs. The second was al-Yassin, that was expelled when he was 13 years old and was expelled from Al-Jura, this village that was razed to the ground, and was expelled to Al-Shati, so in the coastal area in the Gaza Strip. The third one was Arantisi. Arantisi was expelled when he was 1 year old, so together with his family from Ibna to Khan Yunis. Right. So the bottom line of all of this is that if you want to really eradicate Hamas, you need to know and to address history. Of course, this is no way of implying that all Palestinian children which lived or live an unhuman life will become militants. It would be outrageous to imply something like that. What I want to say is that we need to know history. Otherwise, it seems that Hamas came from Mars, and it certainly is not the case.
Important historical context that you give us there, and we really appreciate it, because indeed, from the beginning, Israel has said that its mission was to destroy Hamas entirely, militarily, politically. And it's increasingly clear when you see what's happening on the ground that that's not happening. I wanted to ask you about the Europeans' position. As you mentioned, many Western countries are opposed to the idea of a ceasefire, but at the same time, they're calling for more humanitarian aid. The Europeans have announced more aid money to the occupied Palestinian territories. Do you think that makes up for their lack of support from many of these countries to the Palestinian people?
Yes, this is really something that won't make any change. Let me, in this context, also remind you that according to the studies of the Israeli economist Haver, that wrote that about 78% of the humanitarian aid that are sent to the Palestinians end up in the Israeli economy. So let's say that there are different studies, but that we know that certainly a large percentage of this humanitarian aid do not arrive to the Palestinians, but end up in the Israeli economy. So in this sense, the European Union should be more careful also in relation to that, being aware that you are in a context like the West Bank, in which this population is under full control. They are tried in military courts. The West Bank is the only place in the entire world in which there are juvenile military courts, so a court for children between 12 and 15 years old. As I said, is the only place in the entire world in which there is a court for youth, and the rate of conviction for Palestinians in front of these military courts, so also adults, is, according to Israeli data, official data, 99.74%, meaning they are almost sure that they end up with a conviction.
Right.
So the European Union should take into account this, all this.
Yeah, coming back to the conflict in Gaza, how do you see it evolving in the next few days, the next few weeks, with this resolution now calling for more humanitarian aid, which was adopted at the Security Council? Are we likely to see another resolution on a ceasefire at the Security Council, or is that still far from happening?
Probably we will see another one, but there will be another watered-down resolution. I don't see at the moment any chance that will be something really somehow that will make an impact, at least in the short term. So you ask me what will come next. I think that the plan was clearly stated by many Israeli public officials and politicians. We know also that the Israeli Minister of Intelligence was telling us that the plan was to expel all Palestinians, so at least a large percent of Palestinians toward the Sinai, so to make unlivable the Gaza Strip, because it's a place where, of course, also the weapons set under the soil, so it's a place that is unlivable. So once that the place is completely unlivable, people will be obliged to leave. Certainly not all, but a large percentage of them. So in this sense, you will ask me what will happen unless the international community really start to make real pressure, and also countries like the US and so on would realize what is really happening on the ground. Unless that happens, I think that this expulsion will occur.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Lorenzo Kamel from Turin University, joining us there from Rome. Thank you very much for your time.